Hi, today we are discussing recurrent implantation failure. Recurrent implantation failure is a condition or a term that we use when multiple embryo transfers fail. Now, this definition has been undergoing a change over a period of time. There was a time when we used to do a day 3 embryo transfer, that is, embryos that were formed and developing on third day of life were being transferred. When compared to a day 5 embryo transfer, that is a blastocyst transfer, day 3 embryo transfer have a slightly lesser implantation rate. So the recurrent implantation failure definition has been changing as the methods or the procedures that are involved in IVF have changed over a period of time. So when day 3 embryo transfers used to be done, recurrent implantation failure we used to call the condition was defined as a failure of at least 3 embryo transfers over a period of time, either consecutively or with breaks in between. Whereas once the blastocyst transfer came into a routine practice, we defined the recurrent implantation failure usually at the end of 2 embryo transfers. However, we need to understand that RIF or recurrent implantation failure definitions have changed across the world depending on what we are talking about. That is, if it is a PGTA embryo, that is an embryo which is tested and found to be normal, RIF definition may vary. If the embryos are untested, RIF definition may vary. So at present, at Aspire, we take that if 2 embryo transfers wherein blastocysts have been transferred and pregnancy has not ensued, we call it as RIF or recurrent implantation failure. There are several reasons why this may happen. First, let's discuss causes of the embryo. Now, with advancing maternal age, we know that number of oocytes that are abnormal or aneuploid are higher. So what happens with abnormal eggs is also that abnormal embryos are common. So though the embryo may look normal, it might be aneuploid. That means it may not have the right number of chromosomes. So in that situation, when the percentage of abnormal embryos are higher, implantation rates are also going to be higher. So one of the most important factors for RIF is an advancing maternal age, especially after 35 and more so after 38. Now coming to the second most common cause, wherein there are chromosomal errors in the parents. Like if either the mother or the father is carrying any translocation or inversion within their chromosomes. We're all made of 23 pairs of chromosomes. 22 of them are somatic, which decide how we look. One pair is sex chromosome, decides the gender, that is whether it's a boy or a girl. Now with these 23 pairs of chromosomes, if there are translocations, say chromosome number 1 breaks and goes and binds to chromosome number 3 or 4 or 5. So such kind of incidences are called as translocations. So either the mother or the father may be carrying a translocation. They may have the right number of chromosomes and have a normal phenotype. But however, when they form the egg or the sperm, depending on who is carrying the translocation, the percentage of eggs will be a higher number of percentage of eggs will be abnormal in the lady, or a higher number of percentage of sperms will be abnormal in the man. So if a person carries translocations, we need to understand that the gametes are going to be abnormal, because when the gentleman or the lady contributes only 23 chromosomes and not 23 pairs, so the chromosomes split, and during the splitting, things can go wrong with the egg or the sperm. So when eggs or sperms land up being abnormal, similarly the embryos land up being abnormal, and this is one of the very important factors why implantation may not happen. Now, how do we handle this condition? So if a couple, one of them is carrying any translocation, one of the ways of avoiding this from going on to the embryo or having abnormal embryo is by creating more embryos and checking all of them as to which ones have normal number of chromosomes and normal setup of chromosomes, and then choosing only the normal one for a transfer. That way, one will be avoiding the pain of transfer and no pregnancy. 2, miscarriage rates also will be quite less. So having a healthy live born is much more easier. Similarly, even with advancing maternal age, if that is the reason for RIF, in them doing a PGTA will help us know which are the embryos that are normal. However, choosing those normal embryos for transfer will improvise the pregnancy rate. One critical factor that we have to keep in mind is that in advancing maternal age, the quantity of eggs is also on the lower side. Now, because the quantity is lower, it takes multiple attempts for us to hit on that one normal euploid embryo for us to have an option for transfer and result in a good pregnancy. Now, let's discuss the causes that are related to the uterus. Now, there are situations called as adenomyosis or fibroid uterus or Asherman syndrome, wherein the problem is basically with the structure of the uterus. So in women with endometriosis especially, they tend to have this condition called as adenomyosis. It's a condition wherein the monthly loss of blood that happens because of endometrial shedding can actually go within the wall of the uterine cavity, or rather wall myometrium what we call, and result in a condition called as adenomyosis. Now with adenomyosis, again there are several stages depending on the size of the uterus. Larger the size of the uterus due to adenomyosis, the lower the implantation rate. So in adenomyosis, it can be a challenge. The lady may take multiple attempts to reach a healthy pregnancy. pregnancy due to the structural abnormality within the uterus. The other important condition is multiple fibroids. So if the uterine cavity has multiple fibroids and the cavity is distorted due to a submucous fibroid or a large fibroid within the wall of the uterus, in such situations too, structure of the cavity is abnormal. Implantation may take time. They may need multiple attempts to reach a viable pregnancy when compared to somebody who has a normal uterus. Now, the other conditions, as I said, like Asherman syndrome, that if there is a problem within the cavity wherein there are adhesions, the endometrium is not developing well, endometrium lands up being very thin. In such situations too, reaching a pregnancy with just the first and the second transfer might be difficult. They may need multiple transfers before reaching a viable pregnancy. Last but not the least is a functional derangement of the implantation window. Let's understand how do we do an embryo transfer. So a frozen embryo transfer is usually timed by giving the lady some estrogen tablets, preparing her lining, and then giving a progesterone and transferring the embryo. Now, this duration of progesterone after a estrogen preparation of the uterus is usually around 6 days. So we calculate once the endometrium becomes a nice triple line with 8 to 10 mm thickness, we give progesterone, and 6 days from there is when the embryo transfer is planned. There are times when there is a shift. This is on the premise that the implantation window is on the 6th day of progesterone. But there are times in some women where there is a shift of this implantation window. It's not on the 6th day, it might be on the 5th day of progesterone or it might be on the 7th day of progesterone. Now, this identifying implantation window is done by a test called as ERA, or endometrial receptivity array testing. We mimic a frozen embryo transfer. That means give estrogen to the lady, give progesterone, and 6th day instead of transferring the embryos, we take a small biopsy to know whether the implantation window is formed or not. There are 3 kinds of reports possible out of that test. One, the report may come as receptive, which means it is apt and on the 6th day, so we continue doing the transfer at the same time. It may come as pre-receptive. That means the endometrium is not yet formed an implantation window, so we may have to postpone the transfer by 1 more day, which means the transfer will happen on progesterone plus 7th day. Or it might come as post-receptive, wherein the implantation window has come and gone, which means it is formed slightly early. So in such situation, the embryo transfer happens on progesterone plus 5th day of the endometrium. Now, we need to understand that shift in implantation window is a real issue that happens in some women. We have had a couple of cases wherein the implantation window formed as early as 3rd day of progesterone, and we had to transfer the embryos also on 3rd day with a successful out. So this is one of the important tests in women with RIF, wherein if there is no other reason that can be identifiable for lack of pregnancy, ERA will help us identify when the implantation window is forming so that we can decide adequate or an apt embryo transfer time. One important cause for RIF is also inflammation of the endometrium, which is called as endometritis. And endometritis could be most often related to infections which are subclinical. See, infections of the endometrium, when it is florid, most often it will manifest in the form of pelvic pain, discharge, fever, etc. etc. But however, when it is subclinical or latent or dormantly present within the endometrium, it only results in subtle inflammation of the endometrium and can actually cause implantation failure without any other symptoms. So this identifying chronic endometritis as a cause of RIF is extremely important, and there are certain diagnostic modalities for the same. And the most important factor is the diagnostic hysteroscopy, which usually is done between day 7 to day 10, wherein we put in a scope into the uterine cavity, check the endometrium, see if it's inflamed, see if there are micropolyps, see if there are any adhesions, especially flimsy adhesions, and also take a small biopsy to check if there is signs of inflammation. So at Aspire, we do a test called as DICE panel, which helps us know what is the kind of organism that may be present and if there is need for any course of antibiotics that might help overcome the same. Coming to the systemic and medical causes. In systemic causes, medical reasons like uncontrolled diabetes, uncontrolled hyperprolactinemia, or uncontrolled hypertension, these all can be reasons for implantation failure. A person who is hypertensive, we need to imagine how the blood pressure within the blood vessels can be so high, leading to abnormalities, either leading to lack of implantation and or also early miscarriages. So it's important that the medical condition of the person is optimum before going ahead with any form of treatment. Apart from that, metabolic disorders like obesity, insulin resistance, these also need to be identified, and if there is scope, it's important that the lady loses some weight, comes into the normal BMI before proceeding with any further transfers. And with respect to insulin resistance, there are some medications that might help in correcting insulin resistance, which in turn can optimize the embryo transfer outcome. Last but not the least, a systemic problem can be blood clotting issues like APLA syndrome or thrombophilias. These are conditions wherein a person has a higher tendency to clot. See, for good establishment of the embryo into the uterine cavity, the most important factor is good blood flow between the embryo and the uterus, and establishment of the placenta while it is happening. If the lady has clotting disorder, the minute blood vessels tend to clot, and this can result in either lack of pregnancy or even a miscarriage as early as 5 weeks, 4 weeks. So it's important that if there is history of RIF, we check at least for the common blood clotting disorders to make sure that she is not having any, and in case she is positive for some, there are answers like blood thinning tablets and injections can help improvising the outcome. The last but not the least and highly controversial and debated area is immune system disorders. Now, for the mother to accept embryo, which is half foreign, by which I mean the embryo has genes or chromosomes from the father too. So it is kind of a transplant for the mother. And for the maternal immune system to identify the embryo as its own and allow a good implantation, it's a very delicate balance of accepting a foreign but at the same time preventing infections. Now, this happens very naturally, and this area is extremely poorly understood. The tests for immune regulation are also extremely controversial, but however, there are some tests which have been in vogue for some time. But however, this is an area which is quite controversial, and guidelines so far say that testing for these disorders may not be done as a routine but rather as a research subject. Some of these tests include NK cell testing, either peripheral or endometrial NK cell testing. However, at present, we do not have a threshold of what the NK cell level should be and whether they are pro-pregnancy or anti-pregnancy. These things are not yet understood. However, as the research evolves, we may know more and more about this. The second thing is about the balance between Th1 and Th2 immunity. Pregnancy is a Th2 dominant situation, but however, if the lady has a Th1 dominant situation, rejection of pregnancy is very common and pregnancy may not establish well. However, the tests for this balance are also very controversial, and whether we should be testing this, well, with time we'll come to know. Certain autoimmune conditions, when present, can actually make it more difficult for the lady to conceive, especially ANA positivity, that is SLE, rheumatoid arthritis, APLA syndrome, and many of these thyroid autoantibodies, when present, can have a ill effect with respect to implantation and lead to RIF. So if there is autoimmunity in other systems like SLE or rheumatoid arthritis, it's important that those conditions are well stabilized, well treated before going ahead with the embryo transfer. Some of the strategies to overcome immune-related dysregulation or immune-related block to pregnancy could be use of corticosteroids, use of intravenous immunoglobulin, use of intralipids that are known to be helpful in making the system more pro-pregnancy, and of course hydroxychloroquine. Hydroxychloroquine, especially in cases of ANA positivity or in cases of rheumatoid arthritis, may be a good idea. Corticosteroids, when used, has to be extremely measured because they seem to be having some side effects also in the form of genetic defects, in the form of glucose intolerance and things like that. Whenever these medications, we need to understand, are still debated, are controversial, but however, when used, they should be used at the minimum dosage, and also make sure that we should watch out for any side effects of the same. In the event of the lady being positive for either APLA or thrombophilia, low-dose aspirin, especially 150 mg of ecosprin or heparin come in the form of injections, are known to be helpful in improvising the outcome of the embryo transfer. They should be continued not only till pregnancy, but they should be continued at least for the first 3 months of pregnancy to make sure that there are no instances of miscarriage. But however, if she's APLA positive or thrombophilia test positive, it's always desirable that we continue it throughout pregnancy to prevent conditions like preeclampsia, intrauterine growth restriction, and so on and so forth, which are very common with thrombophilias.